Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us. I'm Wes Decker, the city's communications officer. I'm joined by the city's grant coordinator, Stacy Pierre-Lewis, and we're going to talk about ARPA money, and in particular, ARPA nonprofit funding and the application in order to get yourself some of that money, should you be eligible. And Stacy's going to walk us through all of that. I'm going to play the role of a nonprofit today, so you can talk to me as if I'm someone asking those questions, needing that type of guidance. But let's go back to the beginning with this, because we're talking about ARPA funds. The city received a pretty good allotment of ARPA funding, and now we're at this point where things are becoming a bit crucial in terms of handing this money out, making sure that it's used by the deadline. So give us a little background on how the city came to receive this money and what we're attempting to do with this allotment in particular.
Sure. So the funds, ARPA, the acronym stands for American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. So with the COVID-19 pandemic, we were able to receive an allocation of $20.4 million to assist with the problems that came with the pandemic. Of course, we all remember how crazy that was. And so funds have already been used for several projects to assist with vaccinations, making sure that we can socially distance. And now that we're in this phase, and COVID is a little bit behind us and it's a little bit different, we're looking at some other ways to allocate the money. And Mayor and Council has decided to allocate $600,000, which would be awarded to eligible nonprofits for their own projects. And so there'll be several categories. It's going to be a total of 7. And an eligible nonprofit can apply under one or more of any of these categories.
Okay.
So there's children and families, economic recovery, education, health and health disparities, mental health, transportation, and seniors.
So that brings to mind this question. We have a number of categories. So me as a nonprofit, heading up a nonprofit, how many categories am I eligible to apply for funding in?
Well, if you have an eligible project, they can be on all 7.
Okay.
Absolutely, and so it can be 1 or it can be 2 or 3. And so you're eligible to apply for up to $50,000 in each project category. So for example, if you had a project that helped seniors and also provided transportation for those seniors for a specific program or project that you had, then you could get up to $100,000 for that award.
Okay, and this process, and let's go back for a moment, Mayor and Council deciding this is the way that these funds were going to be allocated. That's to make it as fair and equitable as possible.
Exactly. We definitely want all nonprofit organizations to have the chance to come in and present their ideas and present their proposal and hopefully get the assisting that they need to really get their projects off the ground.
Now, this is tied into the pandemic, as you said, so there has to be some sort of way for the nonprofit to prove that it was impacted negatively. So they have to supply that type of information. So that's part of what goes along with the application. We're not even to that application yet, but what are some of the other things, some of the requirements up front that will tell a nonprofit whether or not they are eligible to go forward from here and then fill out the application?
Well, so project proposals have to identify a negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So a few minutes ago, we talked about vaccination and social distancing. Those were direct impacts of COVID-19. Now, we also have some indirect impacts. So, for example, when children had to go and learn from home, there was a big transition. They needed Wi-Fi and maybe they needed computers, or they had to figure out a way to be disciplined, to get up and attend class over the laptop or over their tablet.
Right.
And so some children had trouble with that, falling behind. It's a different structure. Maybe mom and dad had to help, or another family member had to help. And so with that transition, an indirect impact is it was hard.
Yeah.
And so sometimes something like a tutoring program or some education program, maybe an after-school program that can assist with that, that would be still an impact of the COVID-19 pandemic that could still be happening.
And I guess I was alluding to this earlier when I led into that, and may have jumped ahead just a little bit. So what's some of the documentation then that would be required on the nonprofit's part?
So in addition to your application, we would need you to submit an IRS nonprofit designation letter. This is the notice that you receive from the IRS to confirm your nonprofit 501c3 or 501c19 status.
Okay.
You can obtain that online. And the next document would be a certificate of good standing from the Maryland State Department of Taxation and Assessments. Also, that can also be requested online as long as it's been within the last 30 days. You can even send a screenshot that shows your certificate of good standing.
Okay.
A project budget that's going to detail exactly how you plan to use the funds for your project and a timeline. And last but not least, you'd have to have a SAM.gov registration. It has to be an active registration. If it's inactive or if you're just not in the system at all, we wouldn't be able to accept that. There is a unique entity identifier number that's required for all organizations who are going to be receiving federal funds. So
Okay.
that's a requirement, which also can be obtained online.
All right, so now I'm pretty sure that my nonprofit is eligible and I want to go forward with the application process.
Mm-hmm.
So take me through that. This is where I get a little intimidated, so be gentle, have an open mind, get me through this, please.
No need to be intimidated, Wes. You're going to get through this. It's just going to be a piece of cake for you. So how to apply, you want to visit the city's website at hagerstownmd.org. And then if you scroll to the bottom and click on the ARPA nonprofit application button, that's going to link you to the application.
Okay.
Once you complete your application form, you're just going to email that application and all of the supporting documents that we talked about to grantsmail@hagerstownmd.org.
Well, I feel like I should be able to pull that off, but what? Just what if I happen to have some additional questions?
That's no problem. So our application timeline will want to have all questions in by August 25th. So that means you can send an email to that same email address we talked about,
Okay.
grantsmail@hagerstownmd.org. That box is going to be monitored regularly, and so you won't have to wait longer than 24 to 48 hours for a response.
All right.
And we want to make sure that all questions are in by the 25th so that after that, you've got a few more days to make any corrections or updates.
Okay.
And the submission deadline is September 1st. After you submit your application, the ARPA Grant Committee is going to review your application and send it to Mayor and Council for review. Once Mayor and Council has finished the review, we're going to notify all applicants of the status about November of 2023.
So now I'm a happy camper. I've received an award. I've been notified. What do I do next? What happens now?
The city is going to reach out to you with your agreement. That's going to contain all of your award terms, any compliance details, quarterly reporting. We'll help to walk you through those things. They can be a little confusing sometimes, but we'll definitely help walk through that process and how to actually request your funds. And you do have to spend all of your award funds by December 31st, 2024. If they're not all spent by then, unfortunately, you'd have to return them to the city.
Okay, that's the last thing I want to do. So I will definitely circle that date on the calendar. And let's just work backwards on a couple of dates there. So applications must be in by September 1st of this year, and all questions should be submitted by August 25th of this year to ensure that you've got everything answered so that you can get your application in. Stacy, thanks for taking us through this.
Sure, of course.
For someone who had no knowledge of this going in, I feel like I could go out and do it now.
Good.
But
Excellent.
most of all, we want everyone out there to be able to do that. So you're off and running at this point. And again, if you have questions, you know where to go. We've outlined all of that. Good luck to everyone in submitting your ARPA nonprofit funding application. Thanks again, Stacy.
Thanks, Wes.